I'd like to show you my chess tempo book, Endgames Made Easy. Okay, so it starts with fairly basic endgames and then gradually they get more and more complex. So it's sort of players up to 1800, and there are even some positions that 2000 players won't be familiar with. Okay, so we've got pieces versus Lion King. Okay, so starts off with in games without pawns, the Jordan 4-point rule, which will be explained. Starts off very basic in games, which most players know, but it's just put in. For beginners, Queen against King. In which case you solve it and see if you can find the right moves. Talks about the concept of zugzwang, Rook against King. The second way to mate with King and Rook. Two bishops against King, just shows the final stages. This unlike the King and Queen against King and Rook against King. This is fairly rare. And then we've got the final stages of a mate with Bishop and Knight against King, which again is extremely rare. But then another rare one is two Knights against King, which is a draw with correct play. It shows you how to draw. It talks about passed pawns, different types of passed pawns. Got the path of the passed pawn, under promotion, more complex example. There's a fairly famous position where there's an under promotion to a rook. We've got piece sacrifices, got passed pawn on the other side of the board, got a piece each, got different types of pieces versus each other. Bishops versus bishops, bishop versus knight, knights versus bishops, rooks versus knight or bishop, rook versus rook, queen versus queen, and so forth. So got pawns against loans kings, so we start off with one pawn. So things like the square of the pawn, when can the pawn be caught, and got the bishop and the pawn of the wrong colour, and we've got king and pawn against king. There's various types of positions which can be won or which can be drawn when defending. Sometimes you take on the role of the side trying to win, or sometimes you're just trying to draw. You've got lots of king and pawn against king in innings. You've got some quite tricky ones, even though there's only a pawn on the board. That one mistake can turn a win into a draw. And you've got two pawns against king. There's a few things to know about that, when the pawns support each other and when they don't. And got the idea of sacrificing a pawn when you've got two pawns. And then there's when the king can hold two pawns, and then you've got the opposition. I've got a special way which I worked out myself of working out the opposition for any two squares on the board. We've got the outflanking manoeuvre, got ways to defend, got zigzagging with the king, the trebuchet, more zigzags, pass pawns against pass pawns, a complex one which a world champion mucked up with one pawn against one pawn. Okay, we took two pawns against one. Some are quite tricky. And then got triangulation, got various manoeuvres and so forth. Then we've got more complex pawn endings and all kinds of ideas and more complex pawn endings. Then there's some quite tricky ones. Then there's knight endings, knight against pawn and knight against knight, and knight against. Okay, then there's bishop endings, bishop and pawn against king, and so forth. And they've got bishop versus bishop of opposite colours, and then we've got bishop against pawns and so forth. So lots of bishop endings, and there's rook endings, lots of different rook endings, rook and pawn against rook and rook against pawn and so forth. Lots of endings which happen again and again and again. And yeah, good things to know. And okay, so I've got queen endings, we've got queen against pawn, queen against pieces, and so forth. Queen against queen, and then we've got rook against minor piece. So yeah, there's lots to learn about the end games, and sure a study of this will help to bring your end game knowledge up to about 1800 level or so. Okay, so thank you for watching.